Now, host Robert Jordan welcomes this week's honored guest to the Veterans Outlook podcast.
Well, greetings, friends. I'm Pastor and author Robert Jordan, host of the Veterans Outlook podcast. This week's honored guest is Victor Bretting, who grew up without a present father and learned early that life doesn't hand you direction, it expects you to find it. His mother became Victor's anchor and an example. She worked long hours, carried more weight than anyone should have, and taught him that responsibility isn't optional. It's earned daily. There were seasons Victor got it right and seasons he failed hard. Broken relationships, business setbacks, moments when pride cost him more than it gave. But over time, Victor began to understand something. This is not a story about perfection. It's about becoming. Today, Victor owns B-Tex Ranch, a sprawling 1,600-acre premier whitetail and exotic hunting club. It truly is an honor to welcome Victor Bretting to the Veterans Outlook podcast. Victor, good afternoon to you, sir. What an honor it is. I'm so interested in learning more about your life's journey and more about your sprawling ranch there, and find out about what you do and how you became what you are today. And thank you for all that you do, and welcome, sir.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to being on your podcast. It's a special moment for me.
You're very welcome. So tell us about how you grew up, where you grew up, and of course, about your beloved mother.
So my memories of my dad were really kind of short. My mom was always at all of my sporting events. She put me in team sports to, help me stay organized, number one, and number two, out of trouble, I think was probably the most important thing. She put me in a Lutheran church school ever since I was a kindergartner up until sixth grade. So she tried to ground me, in faith. And it's really about the perseverance, that my mom, grit and determination, that she put in my life. Because as you can expect, you get a little older and you get away from the house and you kind of drift away from your faith and you kind of realize what's important in your life and you drift back. But it's all because of what my mom instilled in me that I believe is got me to where it's at and back to my faith.
Well, you're right there. So many of us kind of lose our way, but ultimately we find our way back again. And I can appreciate that very much. So reading the introduction, I see that over life, it's interesting how you've admitted to having some broken relationships, business setbacks. Can you tell us about some of the businesses that you were involved in that perhaps did not succeed, but ultimately led to success? Because here you are now, very successful. So tell us about kind of the ups and downs along the way and how you overcame those.
Being a contractor or being in construction, for 50 years of my life, I've always said, why would anybody want to be in construction? If you're a general contractor, you work off a 3% fee and all the risk. And especially in today's worlds in contracting, the design teams don't do what they used to do when I grew up in it. And, there's nothing that they approve. It's always reviewed and contractor needs to verify. I mean, there are just so many things in there that make it hard for a contractor to make money. So I've always said, why would anybody want to be a contractor? Well, I had an opportunity with a couple people that I had known. And, we started quite honestly, a pretty successful organization from the start, picked up a big job and we're doing very well. And then all of a sudden you kind of look around the corner and, one of your partners, stealing from the right and the other one stealing it from the left. And so, and I know all these principles, right? The principle of being a good partner is, I look at it as in the old West, right? You're out mining for gold and, the one in the front's got the gun and the one in the back's got the gold. Well, only two things are going to happen. The one in the front's going to shoot his way through and y'all are going to be successful, or the one in the front turns the gun on you and shoots you. Hey, so it's a 50-50 risk. I took that gamble and I've learned from it. Started another operation, which, we have sold since that point in time and kind of retired. And then somebody picked me back up and said, hey, you've got some experience. Can you help me? So I actually went back to work about 3 years ago, probably more on a consultant than actually, doing the business side. Like I told them, the bottom right-hand corner is not mine anymore. I've been responsible for that for 47 years. I'm kind of done. So it's actually good. I mean, I'm a builder by trade. I love to build. I work with my hands. My sons and I built our lodge, by ourselves, the barns, everything. So I do like what I do. I love construction, but man, there's a lot of pit holes nowadays if you're really going to run a business.
So, what type of construction were you involved in? Housing, large scale industrial, or just residential?
I'll,
Or
I'll, uh, our large scale industrial. My first construction job was actually dabbing nail holes on at Fort Hood. So I was raised around the military at Copper Scope. So I was raised around Fort Hood. So my first job was 16 years old. They'd put all the nails in the drive it on the outside, and I'd get my little brush. And I'd get to punch them up, touch them up with paint. But my real first construction job was at a nuclear power plant down in Bay
wow.
City. So everything I've done has been pretty much industrial heavy scale. Like the company I was with, we built the Texan Stadium, built coal fire plants, 65-story buildings. So most of it has been really on the high end, more industrial, civil type of
Mhm.
work, but all concrete related.
Really? Wow. There's a lot more to concrete than just mortar, right? So, can you tell? I mean, which I don't know about, but I do know that there's a lot more to it than most people think that's in a bag of concrete. When it's because there's all kinds of weights and measures and calculations, load bearing, and all that. So, I mean, uh, to me, it's interesting that you just said that. So, tell us more about that, if you would. How that all factors in when you with construction.
So the basics is pretty simple, right? Sand, water, some sort of cement, and rock. I mean, that's pretty simple, and that's predictable, right? The more strength you want, the more cement, you add to the product, and the less water. I mean, that's where it all boils down to. That's the basic understanding of concrete. But in today's world, and quite honestly, everybody wants to be eco-friendly. So, we're concerned about fly ash because that is a part of your cementitious materials that go in concrete is fly ash. So that's a coal byproduct. So you start shutting down the coal plants and now you're looking for the next best thing. So the moral of the story I tell everybody, right now concrete is a bunch of chemicals and admixtures. Settability is tough to do. Workability is tough to do. And concrete companies or ready mix companies, all they care about selling you is strength. That's the thing. But being raised up from the ground up, from a labor into a concrete finisher, it's also about workability. Because if I can't work the concrete, I can't get the tolerance of my floor, which means I can't get it or
Mhm.
flat. So I'll give you a quick story. Quick story is I've lectured a bunch of ACI classes, most of them regional. And one of the guys I know, he's probably one of the only 3 PhDs in civil engineering that's working in the concrete industry in the state of Texas. Well, he said, "Hey, man, I need you to speak for me. We want to talk about manufactured sand." I said, "Okay, no problem." Then what I get led into is I follow a University of Texas professor that's probably written more books than the length of my arm, right? So he's lecturing how wonderful manufactured sand is. It's the next best thing since sliced bread. And I get to walk up behind this guy and kind of tell him, well, you're not really full of what. So let me tell you how this works. So I had to dance around the fact that yes, manufactured sand probably does help our ecosystem. And yes, it does work, but you need to talk to a finisher and you need to let the finisher tell you if it's workable and if they can actually achieve what you're after in the long run. So I've had to dance around a lot of stuff like that in my lifetime.
There's I'm just going to check on something. Maybe you might have the answer to it, but there was a particular concrete or cement. Now, is there a difference between cement and concrete?
Yes, sir. So cement is one of the 4 products that makes up concrete.
I'm trying to think about that because where I grew up, and that was it used to be a very famous cement in upstate New York that, and I can't remember the name of it now, but that they used to bring it down the Hudson or into New York City. And I just can't remember what that was. I was going to look it up real quick. Maybe I mean, this is all, off the top of my head. It wasn't Rosendale. It was that's another famous, but that's no longer. I'm trying to think about what it was called. And if I can't figure it out, it doesn't matter really. But it was up in the Hudson Valley in New York State. And it used to be Rosendale, New York, but there was another one. I can't find it. Anyway, But that was this cement in the region where I grew up. It was known for its properties of some sort, and you would know more about that than me. But they used to bring it from where I lived in this area upstate and bring it down the Hudson when they built all the bridges and all the skyscrapers and all that down in New York City at one point. So I don't know. I'm again, this is off the cuff because we're talking about cement, and I didn't realize we were going to talk about this, but I just can't remember the name of that cement company. But I think it's still in business. I don't know, but anyway, I don't know if you're familiar with that particular cement, but
I'm not. One of my jobs in my earlier years was we rebuilt Fort Drum back
Mhm.
probably 40 years ago. So I'm sure I probably used some sort of cement that you're talking about up there. But a lot of the cement really just has to do with the characteristics of how it's made. What the limestone is put into, or the clinker, or is it fine, or is it more coarse? But there's certain type of cements you would prefer. Like we're stuck in an industry right now where again the ecosystem seems to be more important. There's a cement called L1, and we're having the hardest time do it because the replacement it has with starting to take or doubling up sometimes on the limestone compared to
mm,
the other. So everybody's trying to evolve, honestly, from what concrete really was. And to me, I like it pretty simple. It's the four things that go in: a little water reducer, and call it good. So concrete nowadays is just a chemical admixture. I mean, it really is at the end of the day.
so these in Rosendale, New York, these old cement mills, they converted them over to raise mushrooms. So, because the old limestone, right, the tunnels or whatever, they converted them over. But
Yeah.
anyway, just a thought. Somebody will know, and they'll send me a note after this
I was going to say
episode
they're
is
going to send
released.
you or me a note and say you really don't know what both of y'all are talking about.
So anyway, but I just remember that from as a kid, and these anyway, certain kind of cement there. But
Yes, sir.
anyway, it's just amazing. And rightly so, right? Isn't it that cement has to be inspected before, for its consistency or whatever when they pour it? Is that right? In
Yes,
these
sir.
big jobs,
Yeah,
right? They
you
just can't pour it and let it go, right?
no.
It's very technical, right?
Yeah, you test it at the plant,
Hmm.
where it's actually being batched from. Then they will test it once it hits the job site, and then they're going to test it again for strength and air content, and some other requirements, fluxural strength. There's different requirements, but yes, sir, there's at least 3 tests that go through as we do any pour.
It's amazing how that is, and how it, like you say, it's the construct of cement and how resilient it is. I mean, if you look at a dam, right, and how it holds back such weight behind it, from rivers and whatever. Even up at where I lived, that we have these dams up there, and you think about the tonnage of water behind it and how they have to hold that force, and it's based on concrete, right? So really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
concrete's great in compressive strength. It does not have a lot of fluxural strength, so that's where rebar comes in. That's why a lot of these pours, rebar is the fluxural strength basically behind the compression strength of concrete.
Welcome to FatherBob.co, a platform built on faith, service, and community. Whether you're here to explore, give, or grow, this is your gateway to impacting lives. Here you'll find powerful stories of resilience and faith from Father Bob, a veteran, pastor, and advocate for those in need. Through Bright Future Philanthropy, we uplift lives by providing food, shelter, and hope to those facing hardships. Your generosity fuels real change. Every contribution supports those who need it most. Want to dive deeper? Explore our books, Where Faith Meets Storytelling, or tune in to the Veterans Outlook podcast. giving a voice to heroes who've served. Fast, simple, accessible. FatherBob.co is designed for a smooth experience across all your devices, so you can engage anytime, anywhere. Are you ready to be part of something bigger? Visit FatherBob.co today. Explore, give, inspire. Because together, we make a difference.
We now return to our conversation on this week's episode of the Veterans Outlook podcast.
We talked about the business setbacks. That's one of the things is that a lot of folks can't handle failure, right? And in life, they can't bounce back. And in the military, especially, I mean, this is something that a lot of folks, they strive for something. And once if they fail, they are finished. And in life, we know life is about failure, and it's about, the rebound and getting back up and moving forward. So it's interesting that you mentioned that has happened to you in your life, and you were able to rebound. So would you say that you got that from your mother and how you were able to rebound after failure, or where did that ability to, move forward after failure come from?
It started with my mom, and then it went into sports. And it's a team environment. You can have the best quarterback in the world, but the guy can't center the ball.
Right.
It doesn't do a lot of good. So
yeah, good.
Failure is not an option. I was raised with failure. It's not an option. You will figure it out. You have to find a plan. And, I tell all the guys that I've led all of my life, I expect you to make a decision. Just make an aware decision, right? What you know, who you've asked, what you've researched, and make a decision. That doesn't mean necessarily it's the right or wrong, but I promise you, if you've done all three of those things, you might break your nose, but you're not going to break your neck. So next time you won't break your nose, right? Well, what's the old cowboy saying here in Texas, right? Get back up, dust your pants off, get back on the horse. I mean, that's just the way it goes. You're going to get bucked off. Right. My wife, right. We got the ranch. She was a Western Pleasure national rider when she was a kid. Right. So she's been riding all of her life. Well, probably hadn't had a horse for 20 years because we hadn't been out in the country. We got here and she said, I want to get my Palomino back. I said, if you fall off and you break a hip, you're done. Right. You know that. Right. She looks at me. She says, yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware. So it's that same thing. You have to have the determination to say, I'm just going to go through with it. And if there's consequences, I'll figure it out. And I'm going to go down the road and make it work.
You got to be aware. You just can't go into things blinded, right? Or, so that you don't be blindsided by consequence, but you're aware that things can happen and you prepare for them, right?
And I've got a risk versus reward theory that I tell everybody, right? You have to understand your risk and is it worth the reward, right? If I am managing somebody's company, I have to understand if I'm fixing to put their company at risk and make $1 million, that's not my call. Right. But let's talk about risk versus reward. Or is it a $5 decision and I've got $1 million upside? Right. So you have to analyze the risk that you're fixing to get into. Then the next thing I tell them is what's the cost? Right. If they say, hey, I really want to work overtime and pour this grade beam. Okay. Well, how much is it going to cost you? It's going to cost me $1,000 in overtime. Okay. Well, what are you gaining from it? Well, it's going to rain tomorrow. It's going to cost me $10,000 to take it back out. Okay. Well, there's your answer. So I think, like you said, you do have to not go into something blindly. I mean, I'm going to tell you that I will persevere through anything, but that doesn't mean I did this blindly. I did it with as much research as I can, with as much information as I could get to try to make a right decision first.
Bright Future Philanthropy Corporation, a Virginia-based 501c3, led by director and pastor Robert E. Jordan, asks for your consideration as he extends hope and goodwill to the most vulnerable living secluded lives in Kabul, Afghanistan. The widows of Kabul. Many of these women are shut-ins and depend on others for care. For some, they are forgotten, living lives of worry. Won't you please consider a tax-deductible donation to Bright Future Philanthropy Corporation? Your generous gift will offer essential food and a warm blanket to an elderly widow in Kabul, and she will know that she has not been forgotten. Thank you, and God bless you. We now return to our conversation on this week's episode of the Veterans Outlook podcast.
So let's talk about so when did you acquire the ranch? I'm really want to learn more about this.
Yes, sir.
It seems really, quite an endeavor. So when did you acquire the ranch?
So we bought it actually the day before Thanksgiving in 2020. So we've had it going on our 6th year, and the ranch was really about retirement. At the end of the day, my wife and I, my wife is my huntress. She's hunted with me for a long time, and we wanted to carry on that tradition. All of our kids hunt, so we thought, okay, here this is a high fence ranch. We can go ahead and build our retirement home. Blah blah blah. And so next thing, we always go to outdoor shows, right? So we went to an outdoor show in Wichita Falls, which is the next biggest town where we're at. We're in little bitty old Alney, Texas, of 3,500 people. So you go to 100,000 town where we're going to go celebrate the big town. So anyways, go out and meet all these people, and my daughter comes up to me, man. She's all excited, and she's got a couple of flyers in her hand, and she says, "Dad, you got to go talk to these people." I said, "What?" She goes, "You have to go talk to these people." So I go down and I meet Gordon Melton. So Gordon, for 20 years, is the founder of Hunting with Soldiers. So I found out about his mission and what he tried to do for the veterans and PTSD. So then the next flyer was about Casey Allen. He's the state director of Cross Trail Outfitters, which is a Christian outdoor youth organization. Meeting those two changed the ranch. It changed what we're going to do and how we did it. Next thing you know, we're building a lodge. Next thing, we've got Gordon and his veterans out. Next thing, I've got Casey and his. Kind of give you an example, for the past 3 years, we've donated 64 hunts, basically, to that terminally ill kids. So we just had our first girls ram camp with CTO. And here Wednesday, we've got 10 boys coming in for their youth ram camp. So it changed our life. This is not about my retirement and our retirement home. This is about what God has led me on, a mission that I had no earthly idea where he was leading me. You just wake up one day and you go, oh, okay, I got it now. I understand my mission. So that's part of what being on your show, that's part of what the book is about, because to me, the ranch is the hub. The spokes are everything else that I can drive to the ranch, because if I can get more people to the ranch that are going to buy hunts and harvest their animals, then I can help donate more. So that's kind of what this is all about.
I know that I know there's a large white-tailed deer, but there's other types of game, right?
We've got 20 different species of animals. A couple of them right now on the property are extinct in our native land. Yes, sir.
Wow. Now, I know there's 1,600 acres, but you said it's fenced. Is that right?
It's high fenced, right? So that's kind of a misnomer, if you don't mind, kind of talk about, because, if you're from Texas, we're a big hunting state, and, a lot of people say, oh, you're on a high fence. So they tied a rope around its neck, they had it on a tree, and they just cut it loose in a 1 acre property for you to hunt. So I'm always constantly fighting this misnomer of, oh, you hunted on a high fence, it's not hunting. Everybody that comes to my ranch is going to hunt. There is no guarantee. There is no 1 day, 2 day, 3 days. It's whatever it takes to, harvest your animal. And part of what we have in our environment is I can take care of our animals better, because it is my responsibility, because there's no place they can go. So I look at our animals, I look at our herd, we manage our herd, harvest only what we need to out of our herd. And kind of like the animals we talked about, right? The Pierre David that are extinct in China. We have them on the property, right? So if it wasn't for hunters that wanted to come out and harvest that animal, they wouldn't be around. So the preservation that we do and how we help with the ecology and the life itself it's a balance, right? And we try to help keep the balance in nature. The predators are out, so we keep that done. That's where the high fence comes from. So, appreciate you letting me kind of talk about really what hunters do, because we are about conservation at the end of the day.
Again, when you say, how many acres are, when you say high fence, what does that really mean?
So
I'm
that
not quite
means,
sure.
So that means instead of a 4.5 foot 5-strand barbed wire fence, you've got an 8 foot tall fence that's got like 4-inch squares, so that nothing can get in or nothing can get out or nothing can jump over it. So that's what would be classified as a high fence. And that's where I kind of said I'm obligated at that point in time to make sure that my wildlife is taken care of, because they can't go anyplace else.
Oh, I see. And so the whole 1,600 acres is high fenced?
No, sir. We've got
Oh, okay.
about 650, 700. The bison herd is all low fence. That's not a high fence. And then we've got, but everything else is pretty well high fence, but the bison herd is not.
How many bison do you have?
So we actually have contracted with another guy. He actually owns the grocery store here in town, been here for a long time. They've been raising bison for a long time. So we just contract with him to go on his property for his herd. Because one thing I learned a long time ago, you bring a new bison into a new property, there's no fence going to hold them. You're just going to lose every animal you got. So I kind of killed that idea and made a deal with him because he's had a herd for a long time. So they're a lot more calm. They're used to it. We just have to be careful when we hunt them, not to excite them too much that they will, run through the fence.
Wow. And how many bison do they have?
Probably around 70 or 80. He's got a decent herd.
Wow.
He tries to keep them under 100. He can maintain them at under 100, but he gets more than that. He gets concerned.
That's beautiful. Wow. They're quite a majestic animal.
They are. They're also good to eat because I love bison fillets. That is probably one of the best fillet I've ever had. Real lean. I love it.
Just the idea of seeing them out in their natural habitat, right? Just remarkable animals. Now, what is the difference between now again, here's the basic question. What's the difference between a bison and a buffalo? What is the difference?
Bison
or is there difference?
There is. Bison is American. Okay. While buffalo, like when you hear Cape buffalo, right, Africa. When you hear water buffalo, Asia or in Australia. So the buffalo is completely different than a bison. Bison is American.
So that's that when people say buffalo, that's wrong. That's a wrong statement when they say buffalo for the American West, right?
That is correct because I've harvested a Cape buffalo in Africa, a water buffalo in Australia, and a water buffalo in Argentina. So yes, they're completely different.
Okay, because I always wanted to know that, and so it's bison is really the correct term,
yes,
not
sir.
buffalo. You're right. Okay, gotcha. What other species do you have on of the exotics do you have on your ranch?
So we have fallow, axis, we have markhor, got ibex, nilgai, stag, elk. We have like 8 different species of rams. We have most of the species of the rams. Those would be the exotic. Oh, we have black buck. Sorry, we just brought a black buck herd in as well. Those would be kind of our exotic species.
And how does one bring in a herd? And where do you get a herd from? This just amazes me. This is a great conversation.
Well, Texas has probably the most game ranches, lack of a better word, anywhere in the nation. It all started years ago with, the YO Ranch. They're the first ones that started bringing in and crossbreeding sheep and a bunch of that. So there's a bunch of breeders around here, lack of a better word. So if you're going to run an outfitting operation that's high fence in the state of Texas, there's really only 2 ways you can do it. One, you bring in so your herd, right? You bring in maybe 1 male and 10 females and you start trying to, propagate your herd. The second one is you call shooters. I would go to somebody that's raising them and say, hey, I need 10 that are this size. And then you basically would dart them, you tranquilize them, put them in a trailer, reverse them, which means wake them back up, transport them over to your ranch, open the door and let them out. So that's how we do it. So, and unless you just have, tons and tons and tons and tons of acreage, there's no way you're going to be able to raise every single animal. Some have to be shooters. And I'm going to give you an example too, right? If I've got the 2 Pierre David that are out here that are 2 males, very calm, very docile. The minute I throw a girl in the mix, the fight's on. And next thing you know, one kills the other, it breaks its horn. So you kind of have to be careful too. I forgot, we do have some scimitar oryx. So the scimitar oryx horns they're very thin, and we only bring in the males because as soon as I start bringing in a female and they're long and they have a point, and when the females start having their fawns, and a male gets near them, they're going to run the head, and they're going to run that horn right through that male. So
really?
you kind of have to learn your balance on what you want to breed because again, at the end of the day, my goal is to keep them alive, right? I mean, my rule is you're going to lose 10% of your animals no matter how much you take care of them. That's just the way it is. So I don't want to push that. So I'm very careful about the animals that I bring in that we're going to breed, and the animals that I'm going to breed out that are just for harvesting on the ranch.
And so on these hunts, the groups that come to the ranch, is it like overnight in the bush, or how do you organize the hunts as
So,
far as the hunters,
yes,
and
sir.
how far out do they go into the 1,600 acre ranch?
So it just depends. I try to do. Let me back up. I've never had a hunter, including myself, right? Because we've got 141 different species of animals across 5 continents, right? So I've never bragged to anybody, man, that second I pulled the trigger, it was the greatest thing I ever did. And it was so fun, right? We talk about what happened before and we talk about what happened afterwards. So my job, right, is to accommodate them on their desires, their needs, their wants. So I try to make sure as we are talking with my future hunters on what they're looking for. So in other words, a father would call and say, "Yeah, I've got an 8-year-old boy, and I want him to shoot an axis buck." And I got to be honest with him. I said, "Well, can he shoot within 2 seconds?" "Well, I'm not sure. Has he shot off a set of sticks?" "Well, no, he hadn't." I said, "I don't think it's going to work." I said, "Because axis are the most weariest, other than aoudad that we've got on the property that we have. They don't come out. They stay in the trees. They stay in the bushes. You got to push and shove and walk and hope and pray and all these things." I said, "An 8-year-old boy is not going to be able to do it." So I want to make sure that they understand what's fixing to happen, because the worst thing I want is to get somebody at my ranch and they're disappointed because they didn't get what they want. So my job is to make sure I'm informing them of what I think is a good opportunity, what's not, what's going to be hard. Then it's your choice, but I want to make sure I inform them.
Yeah. So they come with a set agenda, right? I mean, it's just like it's not like a hunt. I see that one, that's the one I want. No, I want that one over there. I want that speed. I mean, you come like with a set goal in mind, and that's what you're going to leave with, right? It's not just like I see something I'm going to change my mind, or I'm
No,
trying to think.
Yeah, they can change their mind. I'm going to give you an example. My wife and I, here the 16th of this month, we're going back to Africa on a hunt. Okay. I let my outfitter know, and we discuss what my plan is. Then after I go there, it might change. I might see this world record animal and he goes, "Man, that you got to make a choice," right?
Oh,
So
I see.
they always have a plan. And then I look at it as a smorgasbord, right? You can have steak, you can have pork chops, you can have what you want. It's basically up to you, but I want at least a plan. We can change the plan. The way I look at it is like business, right? You and I can plan on going to California. I got a map, you don't. Probably going to beat you there, probably going to do it with less gas. We had a plan. Didn't mean I didn't stop, get gas, eat, but there was a plan. And that's the way I look at the ranch. I try to run the ranch the same thing I do in business. You need a plan, at least to start out with.
Now, there must be natural predators on the ranch as well, right?
Well, and we try to keep them out. We put what's called no dig on the inside of our fence, which is a layer of about 2 or 3 foot of wire, because coyotes are going to dig under, hogs are going to dig under. Your goal is once they dig under and they try to come back up, they're hitting wire and they quit. But every once in a while, we'll get a predator. We actually had a Rhodesian Ridgeback wild dog get on the property, and we thought as coyotes, we couldn't find this thing for like 6 weeks, kill like 5 of our animals. Finally found it. So yes, sir. Predators are, especially fawning season, because bobcats can crawl through a fence, can crawl over a fence. You're not going to stop a bobcat. So we're really careful. Our fawning season is kind of starting. We had 3 whitetail fawns drop last week. So we try to be really, really careful, and we're out in the field a lot. You're trying to listen, trying to watch. We run the fences every single day, just trying to help our wildlife.
That's interesting, because I don't know if the size is different. I mean, I never saw the bobcat. So what I'm trying to get at is, long before I joined the military, I used to raise beef cattle, and this is in upstate New York. And every summer, so after I would work until midnight, and then I would go check the I'd drive to the farm, go home, and I'd go out into the pastures to check just make a head count, right? And every summer, this darn bobcat would, they scream, right? And that thing would be out there, and that blood curdling. I never saw it, but it would scream. Now, not every night, maybe once a summer, but that scream is blood curdling,
Oh, yeah.
And so I never saw it, but what I'm trying to get at, and it never bothered my calves. I don't know if it was whatever it was doing, passing through or whatever, but how big what was that bobcat? That's what I'm trying to get at. Because you talk about he's
Yeah.
after the fawns. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
are they bigger in Texas than they are up in,
They're
New
probably the
York?
same. They're 20, 25 pounds, but you got to
Okay.
think of a fawn when she's first born, or he's first born. I mean, they're learning how to walk, and and the first thing the mom does is they tell them to hide, right? Because the fawns are born without a scent. That's the positive right of nature. Is fawns are born without a scent. So it isn't like a bobcat can smell them or anything to spell them, but if they happen to come across them, they're not going to run. They're just going to stay there. So that's where the problem comes into play.
I see. Okay. So there's no mountain lions or cougars or panthers or anything down in Texas?
Not where we're at. You really got to go kind of northwest. You start getting what we call the Pecos, where you got a little more mountain ranges, lack of a better word.
See.
And that's where you'll start to find some of the elk that are drifting down and some of the bear starting to drift down, but nothing down where we're at.
Now you did mention, I think was interesting too, the hogs, right? The wild boars or whatever. That's really quite a problem, right? How they destroy the land. A lot of people don't realize what that's out of control in some of these areas, right? The population of these wild hog or whatever, right?
Yeah, because their litter will be 10 to 12 and they'll have it twice a year. So all of a sudden, 2 turn into 24 within a year. And then you multiply 24 times 10. That's what you get into. It took us, between the two properties, hunting it consistently, one property took 2 years, the other took 3 years to get them completely off.
And they're not and people don't realize they're not docile.
No.
Right? They're very, very aggressive animals.
Yeah, we were on, so the two properties are joined. One of them is. I got another one that's about 30 minutes away, another ranch. But the two we have are joined. And one day we're out hunting and I knew they were trying to find a wounded animal. And man, next thing is it's like the world's coming to fire. Boom, 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 boom. I'm sitting there thinking, man, what's up? So I called them, we have radios, and I called them and said, hey, what's up? And they said, man, there's a group of about 6 hogs, and they decided to turn on us. So everybody had to start unloading, on us. You get a cutter about this big, and it's going to rip your Achilles heel, or tendon really quick. So they're aggressive.
Just really interesting. I think I saw on your website the inside of your lodge,
Yes,
right?
sir.
What a remarkable, like a museum of natural history.
Well, if you watch a movie, they come alive at night.
Yeah. What a remarkable place. Tell us more about the lodge. Just, so people can get an idea of because it's remarkable,
But so the lodge was really built around kind of what Rhonda and I experienced in Africa. Like, so when we go back this time, it'll be our 14th time going back into Africa. So, the when you come in, it's, cathedral ceiling because you're vaulted 20-foot ceiling so we can put the mounts on the wall. And, then we've got an area that is elevated, but you can see underneath, so it spans. And that's where our trophies are at. We've the 141 different species we talked about of animals that my wife and I have harvested. It's all through the lodge. So that living area is kind of probably what you saw. And then we got an area behind it, which is kind of the trophy room, which you get into the giraffe and the lion and the buffalo and all that kind of stuff, the larger animals that are back in there. But it's our trophy room, right? That's what, we can talk about for the years that we've been hunting. So yes, sir, that's part of the lodge.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So with the circumstances of the day and things, and do you have any problems with protesters or anything like that out there at the ranch? People that don't like what you're doing because the hunting and the rest.
So it's kind of funny. So if I was telling you as where you're at, that answer would be yes. Where I'm at in Texas, not really. But I know, I had to, so the book's about, right, learning and, becoming
Mhm.
the man I was, right? So part of what I had to learn is if, as long as it didn't affect me in my past life, I didn't say anything about it, right? Because it didn't affect me and my family. Then you wake up one day, as you're trying to evolve and you realize the world is that way it is today because you kept your mouth shut, because you didn't say anything. So
Mhm.
I've learned that I want to hear your opinion, but I want to have a conversation about it. You don't need to scream and yell at me and to try to tell me your decision is better than mine. I want to sit and listen to you, right, at the end of the day. So I've become a lot more vocal. I can't tell you that every bad comment that is made maybe somewhere that I keep or I answer. Sometimes it's click the delete button because it's not worth my time and effort and go down the road, right? Why just cause a controversy or a problem? So I like to be able to talk about who we are. I still believe at the end of the day that people give to other organizations that just use that money to advertise. Like when we go to Africa, right? We're supporting number one the local economy. Okay, all the local villages that are there. When we harvest an animal, it goes to the local villages, right? And they don't have protein, right? So that's part of the problem in Africa is the lack of protein. So that's why poaching becomes relevant. Well, the national government does not have any anti-poaching program. The anti-poaching comes from the outfitter. So when we pay money to harvest an animal, they take part of that money, they hire local people to be their
Mhm.
anti-poaching guides, right? So this is where the conservation comes in. It's not just like I said, screaming and yelling about, oh, poor an animal, you killed an animal. No, we're actually harvesting animals, number one, to provide food for somebody else. And then number two, we're doing it so we can keep the ecosystem going. If not,
Right.
it's going to be shot out. When they banned hunting or elephants or whatever, all of a sudden in Botswana or whatever, you start looking at the outcome of what happens. And it's not a good thing because everything, gets destroyed. And I get it, right? I do, right? The villagers are out there and they're planting their crops. The next thing you know, the elephants come in and wipe it out. I do understand. I really do. But I also know that, God put them on this earth for a reason and we're their keepers and we need to figure out how to make that happen.
That's a very good point about the ecosystems and the balance of everything and the unintended consequences, right? And I really do admire people who want to maintain that balance, right? And conservation of like members of society that are hunters, but do it in a way that preserve the ecosystems. Hats off to them. Because it preserves the longevity of species because they're managed very well, right? And like you say, if they're not, the complications of that people don't even think about it until it's too well way too
Way
late.
too late. Yes, sir.
Yep. And whether it be unintended consequences like the a good it seems like with the bears, more they start to migrate into the communities because they're
Hmm.
hungry.
Yep.
They start looking for food. They start to migrate into the communities. They go through the trash, and the communities are starting to sprawl outward. So now, what do you have now? You've got to start to balance the two, right? And so there's a real dilemma there. And so, how do you do that? It's through conservation. And so, uh,
Well, and I'd like to add kind of what you said. Conservation to me is science,
hmm
not belief, right?
hmm
Not feelings. It's science. It's science
hmm
based, and you need to follow the science. That's always been, my thing. Follow the science. Whatever the science says is fine. And when we were in Australia, somebody told me about this same story. In the Aborigines, I can't remember what the guy's name is, but the Aborigines in their tribes, they have one guy, and he's in charge of the ecosystem. He will tell you what you can harvest and how many of them you can because he's in charge for keeping balance of the ecosystem. So
hmm
even way back a long time ago, tribes even understood that we just can't, kill everything. I mean, what happens? Think about the Indians and us. You're talking about bison, right? Think
right.
about how the bison got slaughtered. The Indians didn't slaughter them. We did. We did. The settlers slaughtered all
Mhm,
the bison.
mhm, mhm. That's a very good point. That's right. You know, I think probably the most vocal for hunting, conservation, and big game hunting from Texas, if I'm not mistaken, is Ted Nugent. I've heard him talk about this over and over again, and how when he harvests deer and big game, he gives the food, the carcass and the meat away to the homeless shelters and things.
Yep.
And yeah, it's really remarkable.
Yep.
And yep.
It's
So
funny you mentioned that, because right behind my screen is Ted Nugent's picture and his signature and his hat. Because he's he was the first one to not be afraid and stick his neck out and start talking about what we do, and I appreciate, everything he's done to lead the way, for us. But Ted, I like Ted. Of course, I like his music too, but I like Ted.
Right, right. Well, I mean, he's an ardent supporter of the Second Amendment, of course, but
Yep.
and the First Amendment, but also for for hunting and conservation.
Yes, sir.
And it's so important because even where I grew up in upstate New York, the problems they have if they don't properly manage the deer population, and that's the big one up there, the deer population, and so they really have to manage that properly. So,
Yes,
but
sir.
this has been really an interesting conversation, and so what are the future plans as we wrap up this episode? What's the future plans for the ranch? What do you think the next, say, 5 or 10 years has in store for you? And what what is the one big game that you'd like to hunt and for yourself and your with your wife? And I mean, is there that one species that that's the ultimate that you'd like to, or just if not hunt, just to you haven't yet seen, that you'd like to, just the majestic, oh, there it is, that's the one species that I've now seen through my viewfinder or whatever. Tell us about that.
So the ranch, as far as kind of its future, we purchased. My brother went in with us, so it's my brother, my wife, and I went in on another ranch. It's about 30 minutes from here. It's got 14 breeding pens already set in, so that's kind of our expansion. That allows us to breed more animals, for the hunt. So that's kind of the future. For me and my kids, if I pass tomorrow, I'm trying to teach my kids what legacy means. And legacy is not the ranch. Legacy is the giving that we do at the ranch. So I'm trying to teach them what that really means. So you mentioned about a couple of things. So about, what I want to see. So we're going specific on this trip to dart my rhino. So I'm going to explain that. I do not want to kill a rhino. That is not my tip. We're going to tranquilize him. I'm going to get a picture with him, and that's how I'm going to harvest him, right? Is with the tranquilizer. And to me, that you talk about a majestic animal and just tough, and I mean, that's been on my bucket list. Now, one that's still on my bucket list, because I've been skunked 3 times, is a caribou. Believe it or not, it is a caribou. I got skunked in Newfoundland, I got skunked in northern Quebec, and I got skunked in Alaska. And everybody kind of goes, Alaska? Oh, how'd that happen? One of them freak things. We were actually 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle, right north of the Brooks Range, right way up north, right. And it was 68 degrees, and the tundra was like putting a bunch of basketballs in a gym floor and filling it half full of water. It was the most miserable time. Black flies, biting gnats, and I saw literally 5 animals. 2 were birds. 1 was a black wolf that was one day before season started, and 2 caribou that I wasn't even going to try to go because it'd take me hours to get there. So it's on my bucket list, and my hunting career is kind of on its way down. So if I can dart my rhino and I can get my caribou, I'll probably be pretty happy in my life.
Well, that's awesome. I like the idea of the darting of the rhino. That's awesome. See, I had no idea that, but I just thought about that. See, so that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's not necessarily, it's just being able to, I guess, kneel next to that rhino while he's just taking a nap.
Yeah.
Right?
It is. It's just, that's such a magnificent creature, and you're not going to get that close unless you do. So that's the only way I'm going to get close to that big old horn, But but my wife, when she harvests her animal, she thanks God for the harvest. We thank God for what he's given us in our lifetime. So I want that opportunity to go sit next to that massive animal and say thank you.
And I imagine in some way, shape, or form, once he shakes that off, he'll say thank you to you too.
Yeah,
Because
hopefully so.
he's gonna wake up and say, "Man, I lived for another day." So
I don't
there
know
you
what
go.
happened.
Man. Whatever
was
I
good.
ate, man,
Yeah.
must have been some kind of magic mushroom or
I
something.
think it was a mushroom. It had to be.
It had to be. But well, Victor, this was really a pleasant conversation, and I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I really, really did enjoy it. So I wish you all the very best. We'll link your book in the description.
Thank you.
And just a wonderful conversation. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to speak with us this afternoon. I wish you all the best and good luck, good hunting, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.